Hi there, this is Emran Pilati with TrueAutographs.com, and I'm here in Parsippany, New Jersey at the James Spence Authentication home office, and I'm here with the man himself, the founder, president, and owner of James Spence Authentication, Jimmy Spence. Thanks for taking the time and talking with me today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming this distance.
Yeah, it's great to be here from the West Coast. Today I really wanted to talk about your company, its background, your background, and maybe what the consumer needs to know about authentication. So let's dig into that. Let's start with your background as an authenticator. When did you first start? How did you start? Things like that.
Well, I evolved basically. I started off as a collector as a youth. My grandfather and father were both collectors. I took an interest in that. I wrote to many athletes at the time. I would go visit at grand openings of different stores in my area. And eventually, I guess in my adulthood, I went to many shows where autographs were being sold, and I decided to become a part-time dealer. At that point, I realized I was making more money on the weekends than I was on my full-time job, so I eventually became a full-time dealer. I had tremendous success. I traveled around the country, and I realized that there was a void, and there was a big problem in our industry because most people were selling autographs based on stories, and they were becoming more and more elaborate. And I realized that we should have some kind of a governing body, or somebody should play referee, so I started authenticating, and it really came to me. People would come up and ask me, hey, do you think this is real? Because they realized I had a lot of knowledge in the area, and eventually they asked me to start putting in writing. And at that point, I started charging. So it was really...
You were still dealing at the time.
I was, yes. Yeah. And I couldn't have made a living early on by just authenticating. So what I did is, and I split it, and I was certainly selling more at the time, but at one point, I was approached by a company from California. They were starting up an IPO, a Collectors Universe, and they wanted to buy my inventory, my authentication rights, and they asked me to start up PSA DNA, which you're familiar with.
Sure.
And in 1999, I did that, and I worked for them for some 6 years, and I had enough fire in the belly that I decided after my contract was up that I wanted to go back into business for myself, and I did just that and established in May of 2005 JSA in Pennsylvania, in Orangeburg, Pennsylvania. And after 2 years, I realized that it would be best to move it closer to the New York area, which I was originally from. And I never looked back. It was a great decision. Moved the whole company here, the family, the whole works, and it's grown. I mean, obviously, we have an office here in Parsippany as well as one down in Florida.
How many people do you employ at JSA?
I think we have about 25 full-time workers, and there's probably just as many part-time workers as well. And there might be some part-time workers in there, too, that I'm not even counting. But,
Sure.
We have a couple of different divisions. We have the authentication of the vintage autographs, which is an opinion-based. We also have our witness protection program, where we're sitting right next to the athlete, and we're placing stickers and putting it into the database right then in front of the person that hires us to do it.
Sure.
So.
And with that said, you talked a little bit about when you left PSA DNA. You said it was time to maybe start your own. What were some of the things that caused that thought process of saying, maybe we should go back into doing my own thing?
I think it was, I still had fire in the belly. I wanted to have control of the end product, and I think they wanted to take some of those controls away from me because they wanted to move it to the West Coast as opposed to having the office in Pennsylvania at the time. And by changing things in that manner, I just felt that I could do it an even better job. I wanted to become more descriptive than I had started with PSA DNA. I felt there was a need why people wanted to know what year the ball was manufactured, who what type of stitching was on it, things that would describe the item so there'd be less of a chance that somebody could ever counterfeit the item, the end product, the end authentication, the letter of authenticity.
You're a self-described control freak when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yeah, I guess I am. And, I think, for lack of a better phrase, I think a lot of collectors are very anal retentive, and they want things done. They like pristine. They like things that are perfect. And I think the letters should be that way as well. I think people should, enjoy the letters. And I've seen a lot of people actually display my letters. I mean, I've seen them put in frames alongside of the item itself, and I could tell you that's very, very flattering.
I'm one of them.
I'm very humbled by that.
I'm one of them. I do that
Yeah.
with my authenticated letters. And for me, I love the notarization that you do on those letters as well. Why did you decide that that was part of the process?
I felt that, we do have a number of different checks and balances in our system. One of them is we have a watermark, okay? Mm-hmm. And it cost me all kinds of money to throw that watermark in. You hold it up to the light, and you could see the copyrighted image of my signature on it. Okay, so that's one thing that would make it very difficult to duplicate. We also obviously have a database that we punch all the alphanumeric numbers in that coincide with the sticker that goes on the item.
Sure.
We have my signature or my son's, the two people, well, actually we have three people now that actually sign the letters of authenticity, and each one of those is notarized because we wanted to make it even more difficult. None of our competitors have that. They do not have these notaries that are able to authenticate our signature.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into it, and I think that some of my competitors may have, taken the cheap or the fast route, or the less arduous trail.
You talked about the 25 employees that you have full time throughout the nation. Several of them are related to you. Tell us about some of the family members that are part of the company.
Oh yes, when I first started the company, it was just me to start off with, and maybe a couple other workers that were non-related. But since then, two of my sons have graduated college and moved on, and my son Jimbo down in Florida, who runs the office down in Boca Raton, and my son Ryan, who's now the director of marketing and advertising, and he came on with me just earlier this year after working, for a private company in the videography and marketing business.
So one of the things that people ask is, why should I get my item authenticated? Tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important for somebody to consider authentication for their item.
First and foremost, you want to feel warm and cozy with your purchase. If you don't have that feeling, you could be staring at something that you'll be adoring and never quite knowing whether or not it's going to be marketable in the future. That's important because most people don't keep autographs forever and ever. At some point, they do get sold. They do get, retreaded into the industry. And if a person doesn't have some kind of pedigree, then what will happen is the item will not have the value that you expect it to have. If you have that kind of letter of authenticity, ours is universally accepted by every major auction house in the world at this point. That's so important to the value, and really it should follow that autograph around forever. It's so important that a person would have faith and trust in the authentication service. There are services that'll just sticker and authenticate anything, but that doesn't mean it's valuable because it wouldn't be accepted universally.
And I think one of the challenges is that people think the provenance, the story behind it, supporting documentation is enough. I think it's part of a story, and the authentication is the last piece of the story puzzle being put together. Agreement in that? Thought about that?
I think a person should do their own homework to begin with.
Yeah.
If you're purchasing it from the original owner, I think that person should write a letter of how they obtained it, how they originally received this autograph, or maybe it is removed from a generation. Write what the father or the grandfather, how they had taken. I think that's important. I would like that. When I get an autograph for my collection, I ask somebody to do a little story about it. And often I'll even have that notarized. But I think it is the responsibility of the collector, the dealer, to do his homework ahead of time before it even gets to my table.
Sure. Now, if somebody's thinking about selecting an authentication company, what should they be looking for in that company?
Universal acceptance is one. Is an are many of the auction houses willing to run it with that letter? There's certain auction houses, I see them take the authentication that came with the item and throw it away. They ask me to re-sticker over the sticker that was originally on there.
Yeah.
If they don't feel that that's giving them any comfort or any value, they'll come to us and say, listen, I don't care what it has on it. I just need yours. I have my entire book has your name in it under each auctioned lot of the autographed item. We want your name to be in there. Because if my name isn't on an item in an auction catalog that has it under every other lot, people would start to wonder, why didn't he give a letter for that particular item? So they do want it across the board.
I think one of the other things that we talked about was conflict of interest by the authenticator. Go into that and what JSA is a little bit different than the competitors.
Yeah, it's a call I made many years ago. I felt that I didn't want to be labeled as somebody that was authenticating and selling. Therefore, there would be some type of a conflict of interest. So what I did is I just made sure all my full-time authenticators, myself included, no longer sold autographs. I mean, I was a dealer for many years. I was a very successful one. I have a very large collection now, but it only comes in. It only goes one way. It doesn't go out. I might trade a piece here or there, but I didn't want someone to say, oh, you knocked down my piece, but you're willing to sell that guy one of yours. That would be a terrible way to conduct a business. So fortunately, we have that licked. I think just about all the rest of my competitors, they do indeed sell, whether it's overtly or, over the internet. They're buying and selling, and I didn't want that reputation.
As the authentication company, you have expectations for your clients when they submit. What are some of the things that you look for the customer to do for the submission? Protecting the item when it comes here, getting it ready and prepped for maybe the story behind it. What do you look for as the authenticator to help you with the authentication process?
Well, we welcome all types of provenance that the person can provide. I mean, that would be very helpful to us in many situations, not all. Also, they should protect their item. Perhaps put the ball in a plastic bag, make sure that it's going to survive the journey here. Not everybody comes to our office. Some people meet us at shows. Some people are at conventions. We might go to a person's office or even these man caves that exist all over the United States. Sure. Where a person has this all displayed in their home. So we want them to make sure that they protect it. How do you protect it? Sometimes they might put it in a UV holder. So, there's things in frames. They should have UV glass. They should be in hard plastics and not flimsy things where things are going to crease or fold. You want to make sure that the item is indeed secure, and we'll give it back to you in the same condition.
Tell me about some of the telltale signs that an item has questionable authenticity, maybe before they're purchasing or putting together the thought of, I'm really interested in this item. It seems like a really good deal. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that they should look out for when they're buying this?
Well, I think number one, know the medium itself. Was it produced prior to the person's death, if the person had died? I mean, that's probably the most obvious thing. I've seen many forgers put signatures on balls where the ball was manufactured well after the person's death. I mean, that's so obvious, and that there is something I can certainly call a forgery. That's not a matter of opinion. That's a matter of fact that something was printed or manufactured after the person actually died. Then there are other things about, what does the coloring of the ink look like? I mean, that's something I think you have to develop, an eye for that. The forgers play around with the colors of ink. They'll also use tea or coffee to make things look older. They'll artificially age things by keeping them out in the light or under UV lights to lighten them up to some degree. And then they're putting shellac or different types of solvents, emulsions over an autograph to give it an older look. So there's things that, it takes time and exposure that you probably wouldn't know as a novice collector, but after a while, even things might smell differently as well.
Really? It's that detailed?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, people don't have the kind of machines that we have. I mean, we have machines that are tens of thousands of dollars that we use that you can see things that you can't see with the naked eye, but at least go through some of these rigorous processes yourself to enable yourself, even match it up with other ones that we have authenticated. I mean, there's any given day, there's at least 150,000 autographs that JSA has authenticated on eBay alone. So we have a tremendous presence there as well.
The conversation of AutoPen has come back up into the news again. Mm-hmm. Recently, one of the more famous Cowboy players, Dak Prescott, had an AutoPen scenario come out. Now, it's been around for a long time. It's back in the news again. Tell me about AutoPen and how you and your authenticators are able to see an autograph, a solo autograph by itself, and relay that against an AutoPen forgery.
Well, we have a tremendous database, and what we do is also keep examples, not just of the person's actual signature and facsimiles and stamps and wife's versions, secretarial, clubhouse autographs, but we also have AutoPen templates. And what that does is we are able to match these up to other ones that we suspect are from the same matrix. The AutoPen is basically a duplication, which is repetitive. It will be used over and over again. And the telltale signs of that, or it often doesn't have the same fluidity. It doesn't have the same flow and movement to it. And they usually come to abrupt stops where you could see the ink welling up at the end of the strokes. So that's
it's lifted rather than stroked.
Correct. It doesn't. In other words, it doesn't hit the ground running, and it doesn't lift up in a flared sense. It's just abruptly stops, and it tends to well up a little bit and have like the ink sediment just rests at that point. And once you see two of them, it's very obvious.
Sure. It's
just being able to pick up on the first one that's the most important part.
You talk about this exemplar file. Mm-hmm. It's impressive. I've seen it. You have nearly 700,000 examples of autographs, both authentic and inauthentic. Tell me about that exemplar file. Where did that idea come from, and how do you maintain it on a daily basis?
Well, at one time early on, when computers and especially laptops weren't that popular, I used to actually carry around 3-ring binders, tubs of them, to authentications, and it became quite cumbersome. Now it's all on a laptop about this big, but you're able to hold what we have right now is 700,000, which are in perfect order as far as the field, as far as date order, as far as the chronological sense of what a person's autograph has evolved over a period of time, from the time maybe they were 18 years old in the minor leagues right up until their death. So we keep track of that. I would say any given day, there's probably 400 to 500 examples company-wide that go into that file.
Wow.
We see tremendous collections at major auction houses. We sit down next to athletes and different celebrities and watch them sign. We have access to some of the biggest collections in the world. I have a huge collection myself. So therefore, this is second to none. No one has an exemplar file even close to what we have.
And it doesn't stop with top-tier athletes or even middle-level athletes. You were showing me some of the file subsets,
mm-hmm.
and one of them you had was bat boys.
Yeah.
One of them that you had was sheep herder
shearing.
I mean, it's incredible. Right. That detail, I mean, fill me in with why you go down that far into the autograph.
Maybe because I'm just a nut. Actually, there's so many times over my career that people have shown me a ball and said, whose autograph is that on there? And I always took great pride in knowing who that person was. And a lot of times it might be somebody that's in the clubhouse, might have been a batting practice pitcher. It could have been a scout for the team. It could have been somebody that, most people don't consider very important. But I always felt it wowed a person when I had that kind of knowledge. I was equipped with that kind of knowledge. Of course, they're going to, know that you're going to recognize Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio's autograph. But when it comes down to, who's John Lang on a 1958 Milwaukee Braves ball, I think it means something to the person when they know that that type of minutia. They know the history of what went on that particular year, who was traded for who on a, is it possible that this could have existed?
Let's talk about the today's autograph. Many players, athletes in particular, have, in my opinion, sloppy autographs, almost illegible, very, very different than maybe some of the athletes of the past. When you're looking at these, there's very little consistency between the two. Right? Sometimes you'll see a squiggle here, you'll see a squiggle there. There's really no consistent flow or anything like that, particularly when an athlete is signing at a game or in the arena on the go. How do you cross-reference to make sure that you feel comfortable saying, yes, I believe this is likely authentic, when the athlete has so many different versions of that signature?
Okay, well, I agree. I'll be the first to admit that I believe that a lot of the older celebrity autographs are easier to authenticate because the formation is more distinct and you could read through. Sure. Now the slop that's coming out, especially with the newer celebrities today, they're trying to rush through them for various reasons, whether they just want you to get out of their face or they're just trying to accommodate the multitude of people that are asking.
Right.
So it's definitely more difficult. However, there is a certain flow, speed, movement that you get used to after seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of these autographs come through. We've sat next to these celebrities. We've seen them. We've actually, many of our people still chase autographs. They might go to hotels or arenas, or they're still chasing after them. They know the angle of which the person signs, the type of pen pressure, the placement on the item, where they like to sign, if they don't like to use a certain color pen. I mean, there's all different types of things that empower us, enable us to make that decision. And there's the interesting thing. It's never one person's decision. We have an entire staff that opines on these autographs. For something to get a letter of authenticity, a JSA letter of authenticity, it has to pass through many, many sets of eyes, and everybody has to agree on it. And if it doesn't get a letter. It might even go inconclusive. But if enough people don't like the item, it will fail and get a rejection letter. And then hopefully that will enable and empower the person to get back their money from where it came from.
I've submitted many items to you and your company for authentication, and I've had my share of rejection. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay. Surprisingly, I was very okay with it because it showed me that there was a process of rejection, that there was somebody looking at it and putting some real thought behind it, rather than just rubber stamping for speed. Walk me through the process. So an item is received at your location. What happens with the item then? How is it stored for security purposes to make people feel comfortable mm-hmm. that their potentially very valuable item is protected? How does it go from there, and what's the process of the authentication?
Okay, let's take, for example, if something comes to us, somebody sends in something, FedEx or UPS, into our office. We take the item in, open up the box very carefully, handle it with care, and this is all under the watchful eyes of security cameras. Okay, they're all over the office. So we can track that item as it's going through. We need to process it, and the start of the process is actually identifying the type of item. So there's a sheet that we use that identifies all the statistical points of the particular item. What year, if it was a baseball, what year the baseball was manufactured, which year it was used in Major League Baseball, for example. And then we'll identify the type of ink that was used, the color ink. And after all of that preliminary information is put down on our worksheet, we then look for scores. And many of these scores, we take high resolution digital photography. And even if people aren't here within the walls of our Parsippany office, mm-hmm. For example, we'll actually send those out to people via email and give them whatever the description is as well. So they're independently coming back to our office with the scores.
No influence from other people.
And they don't know what everybody else is.
That's important.
No, of course not. Yeah, that's very important because they don't know what the next guy is scoring something because they don't have access to his score. These are independently coming back to us. And once we gather together all these scores, it's pretty obvious if something is going to pass or fail. And so many of us have trained with each other. We've learned from each other. We've been exposed throughout the entire country. So we're not just here in New Jersey looking at Mets and Jets and Giants and Knicks and Rangers autographs. We're seeing a cross-section across the country where many of these things derive from. You were seeing, if we go to Cleveland, obviously we're going to see a lot of Indians and Browns memorabilia. We go to Phoenix, we're seeing the Diamondbacks or whatever. I mean, it's all over the country. So that exposure has helped us out a great deal.
I think any business that is in the business of telling you if an item is likely real or likely not authentic is at a crossroads of, will I get business again from this person if I give them rejection? I know that writing a letter of rejection is a difficult thing to do because you are going to tell somebody that what you thought was real isn't. Tell me about the process of the rejection of the item and maybe some of the things that have come back to you from a customer to tell you, you know what, I disagree with you. I don't think that that's right. Or I watched it sign with my own eyes. What are some of the challenges that you face as a company that hopes for more business, but at the same time, every time a rejection letter is sent, there's a possibility of losing that customer?
Well, when we give a letter of authenticity to someone, anyone can give that back to the customer because everybody's pretty happy that their item had passed. Sure. And it's not a very difficult task to do. I always tell even the newbies here at the company, when they're doing that, it's very simple to give it back. It's just, how do you give back an item that has been rejected? Now, some people are used to it. I know you mentioned to yourself you received some of those yourself.
Yeah.
However, I think you need to establish some good bedside manner when you're giving back something. You have to be very careful how you deliver. You have to read the person in terms of what's going to upset them, and possibly give them options as well. Using a credit card, for example, when they purchased the item originally, empowers them to possibly get their money back, a lot better chance than if the person had paid with a check or cash. What we do is we don't want to embarrass anyone. I mean, if they're there with their wives and you got to give the bad news, you might want to pull them to the side and explain why the item failed. But I've had many, many people over the years, in fact, as recent as this weekend, that thanked me because they've told me, wow, you saved me a lot of heartache down the road, that I know now that it's bad, and I want to know the truth before I start adoring this, when I put it up on my wall.
Yeah. And I think that goes a long way with me. I mean, I remember getting my first rejection letter on an item that I had signed, and I thought, do I resend it somewhere else? And then I thought to myself, I sent it to the industry leader, and they said no.
But would you want to own that autograph that we said no to, when you'd always cast a doubt in your mind that there could be a problem with it? I want to own the autograph that I see after a few seconds of looking at it and say, that's good. Right. That's great. I wouldn't want to own the autograph that I would have to spend hours deliberating and checking and comparing and spending tons of time on it. That's not the autograph I'd want to own.
And I think that's where the myth comes in. The myth is that any authentication service gets it, looks at it, spends 5 minutes looking at it and goes thumbs up or thumbs down. And just the way that you've described and what I've seen at the office is completely the opposite of that thought process.
Well, the items that we spend a great deal of time on when we deliberate, we're in this very room looking up on these screens and comparing the autographs, and I have all the authenticators in here and we're deliberating, and it becomes quite spirited at times. Somebody will say, well, what about this in the signature? But you can't excuse that. I mean, those items, I can assure you, I lost money on the authentication because I had to gather everyone. It takes time.
Sure.
Sometimes these things could go on for an hour or longer, just deliberating over and over again. And, you have to, fine-tune everything and make sure everybody's ego is in check and all of that. But I can tell you the time when a person scores a high score on an autograph And everyone else on the staff, all the other authenticators and the consultants, they all score it high. Again, that's the autograph you want to own, because there's no doubt in anyone's mind. And it works the opposite way too. When something is rejected and everybody has negative scores on something, that's certainly one you'd never want to entertain owning or sending to another service that's probably going to give you the same answer and cost, just as much money in the process.
And I think people forget that 1 hour of examination by multiple people isn't 1 hour. Mm-hmm. It's 5 hours.
Exactly.
It's 5 people spending an hour
no
doing
doubt.
this.
I know that well. No doubt. I mean, I'm resigned to the fact that I lost money on that authentication just because of the time spent on it. I can only help, though, that when that Babe Ruth or even a Mickey Mantle item comes in, that you know it, whether you turn the lights, dim the lights, put it across the room, turn it upside down, and you say that's it, and you just know that is a valid item. That's the one you want to own, and of course, that's one that takes no time whatsoever, and therefore that's where we make our money.
You talk about Mickey Mantle.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a documentary that was on ESPN. It was very detailed about forgeries and the Operation Bullpen that happened. I think you were involved in helping get rid of some of these bad items in our industry. Tell me about some of the more forged signatures that you continue to see still coming in today. I know Mickey Mantle is one of them. Joe DiMaggio is another. What are some of the ones that you keep seeing over and over
Many
again?
years ago, probably in the early 2000s, I was invited by the FBI to go out and look at their warehouses. And I walked in the very first one. They showed me 2 warehouses that particular day. And there were pallet racks just chock full of items that were seized from forgers in this Operation Bullpen. And it just was as far as the eye could see. You could see how big of a problem this was. And this is just what they confiscated. Imagine all the stuff that had made its way into the public,
Sure.
Into their collections. It was amazing. And it was interesting that it was all basically the same 15 autographs. I mean, there was a smattering of other ones there, but you saw Mantle, Williams, DiMaggio, Tiger Woods, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali. There were so many of them, and you realize that this was just full-time jobs for these forgers. They were just cranking them out because the naive, the gullible public was willing to buy it, without asking questions. And until I started this authentication service, the first full-time authentication service, no one really, people were just blindly buying this stuff. And here it is some 20 years later, I'm seeing a lot of this stuff come out of the woodwork. And unfortunately, I've got to be the bearer of bad news. So again, getting back to the delivery, you've got to have good bedside manner. You've got to explain, basically spend time with the person. I mean, it's kind of like telling a cancer patient that they've got a problem, and it's you've got to be sensitive.
Where do you go from here now?
Yeah,
right?
how can I help you? I want to help because I've been there. I've bought bad autographs early on, and it's not a good feeling, and nobody enjoys that feeling. And I think that's where people need to educate themselves. Always find a way. Always pay with a credit card so you have a way out. Make sure that they write on the receipt that it must pass JSA authentication in order to consummate the sale. I think these are things that a person should, and educate yourself. Look at other valid examples, things that we have authenticated. Does it look like it even has a chance? Does it look similar to that? From your untrained eye, I believe people should educate themselves more and more.
A lot of people have a lot of hard feelings towards Mark McGwire for his role or alleged role in the steroids, but he was a very, very valuable piece in the Operation Bullpen. In fact, I remember seeing items would be signed, quote unquote, signed by him, coming out just days after the publication or the item was created. And McGwire was part of the group that said, I'm not going to sign anything to show you that this is fake. How do you feel about athletes getting involved in this portion of it? I think it's really important. Do Do you see it still happening
If guys
today?
like him or Tony Gwynn didn't step forward, we may never have come to where we are today. They were very prominent people at the time that realized that there was a problem. They sounded off to the right people, and it started that whole Operation Bullpen investigation and sting operation, which, there were a number of people that, had to answer to it from a legal standpoint, criminally.
Yeah.
So it was very important that he did indeed get involved. I might add that because of, what he did, I mean, he drove the market. I mean, it was, of course, there was always the people that would buy Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth autographs. But as far as what was going on at that time, he, Jordan, even Sammy Sosa, they were driving the market, making this a very, very popular market. I mean, I mean, I may be stepping in front of everything, but seeing the people that are getting into the Hall of Fame, I think there's a place for Mark McGwire down the road. And I think, we've seen other people, get in. I believe maybe when the old guard, people my age or older, don't have the voting, have the vote anymore for the Hall of Fame. I know they just announced last night about the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But I think you'll see guys like McGwire get in.
I think over time, I think they'll realize that is the era that this all lived in. And in where I live in Northern California, I got to see McGwire and Bonds go through that. And Barry Bonds, in my opinion, was a Hall of Famer before any of the suspicions anyway, just based on what he had done prior to that. Let's talk about stories from the road and the submissions. When you have items that are submitted, you see upwards of nearly 500,000 items annually submitted in some form or fashion, 500,000 autographs, I should say, that are authenticated. But every once in a while you get one that just, whoa, right? Something that comes in, or it's coming in and you can't wait to see it. What are some of these items, maybe one in particular that really gets you that you said, wow, I can't believe that this is in our hands to authenticate?
Well, just this past weekend I had presented to me the autograph of the great-great-grandfather of George W. Bush. And I was in awe that I'd never seen it before. And it came out of a Yale book which had all of his classmates in it. And it was something that I had to jump on myself. I couldn't be more excited. I just thought that was a really, really cool autograph, and I happen to own it now.
Yeah.
So it's just something like that, doesn't come about. I mean, if I never saw another Mickey Mantle autograph, it wouldn't bother me because I've seen so many in my life. But when you see something that's rare and you realize the historical significance of something that you're holding, something that's very historic, that always excites me. And I'm a historian, I'm a collector, I'm very fond of autograph collecting, so, yeah.
In particularly, you collect checks of presidents. Is that correct? Just
Yes.
presidents itself?
Not just presidents, no. It's a who's who of, I've got Houdini, I've got Picasso, I've got Hemingway, and many of the presidents, baseball Hall of Famers, football Hall of Famers, I don't think there's
That's awesome. Why checks?
A long time ago, I guess I just had a few in my collection. I liked the way they looked, the way they displayed. You could put a picture above them, the picture of your choice, basically.
Yeah.
And it also is a little snippet of a person's, a point of their life. The person generally fills it out in their own hand. It has a date. It has a payee. Why was he paying this person X amount of dollars to do this service or buy this product? To me, that was very, very interesting. And I realized that I could, it was kind of an infinite set that I would never, ever complete. I would just keep getting more and more famous people. And believe it or not, a lot of these checks make their way out into the public's hands. They get sold. Perhaps someone dies or, somebody that's handling their affairs. The checks do make their way into the marketplace.
You just described it really well. I never even thought of it like that. But there's also items that are pretty ridiculous. What's some of the more ridiculous items that you've seen come in for you to authenticate?
Well, I've been asked this question many times before, but I would say The most unusual item that I've ever authenticated was back an auction house back in the 1990s. I authenticated a prosthetic leg, an autograph on a prosthetic leg that belonged to Bill Veeck. He used to be the owner of the St. Louis Browns. He was president of the White Sox and the Cleveland Indians. And what happened is his leg, unfortunately during World War II, he lost one of his legs, and they gave him a prosthetic wooden leg at the time. And when I guess he wore that out or it was time to get a new one, he wrote on it for a bar owner that he used to frequent, his tavern. He said, "I hope you get just as many miles out of this than I." And they put two grommets on the ends of it and hung it in the bar, and it was there for decades until the bar closed up, and it eventually made its way into an auction house, and it sold, I think, for around $12,000, which I think to this day was a steal. But, Bill Veeck was a character, and as far as unusual items, I think that was perhaps the item that always comes to mind when I'm asked that question.
Part of the authentication process here at JSA includes the witness protection program. Okay, so that was something that you started really early on. Why did you decide to have that as a separate certificate rather than being just in the general basic or even letter? What made you decide that was the right way to go in that one?
Because I was busy enough dealing with the opinion-based letters of authenticity or basic certs, and I felt that this should be a separate division, that it would complement what we were doing. And I also knew that it would be the fastest way to get certificates up on eBay, because you're sitting down next to an athlete who's probably going to sign some 500 to 1,000 pieces at a time, and that many dealers were buying these things in bulk. Therefore, it wasn't necessarily a collector that was trying to hoard these things. They needed to go up for them to sell them up on eBay. And sure enough, I mean, it helped get those numbers. I mentioned before, there's got to be any given day, there's got to be 150,000 items that are up on eBay. So I realized the importance of the WPP. I felt that it was a guaranteed service. It wasn't a matter of opinion. We had to sit there next to the, I couldn't have an employee witness things if somebody got up and went to the bathroom and came back and said, "Oh, you just did these 20 while I was gone." No, you have to witness it, and that's a very important service for us, because you have to find people that are going to do it, that are high in integrity, that are going to be diligent, and also get the items up and on our database quickly as well, so that somebody, when they're comparing the number and the certification on our database, that it's going to be there. It's all part of the process. And again, I couldn't, because I was so busy, I couldn't be part of it myself so much. I needed to have, this group of people that are around the country that take care of this for me.
I've had that service done at several of our autograph signings, and it's of the highest integrity. I've seen it to where, in fact, your sister Karen is one of your better authenticators.
Right, she's located in your area.
Yep.
She's obviously in the San Francisco area, and she loves it. I mean, she enjoys sitting with the athletes. She does her work. She makes sure the stickers are placed in the right area, and not covering up something that would be vital to the way it looked aesthetically.
Yeah.
I think that's important, that someone doesn't put it in the wrong spot, that it's not cracked, that it's not, that it's put on flush.
Two items I want to say to that. Number one, I love the fact that all of your employees, including Karen, ask me where I would like an item placed, the sticker placed, because it's really important, as you described, the aesthetic look of it. And the second part that I really enjoy is that the integrity of it. I remember when she needed to use the restroom in one of our signings, and she asked, "Is it possible to have the athlete that I had stop signing for a short minute while she went to the restroom to make sure that she watched it watch the actual signature, and that went a long way for me to say, wow, she really, really wants to make sure that her eyeballs are on every single signature, and that was important. I think a great authenticator that's on site is a lot like a referee. They're there, they do a great job, but you don't notice that they're there, and all of the JSA witness protection.
They should go
people,
unnoticed, absolutely. And I hope she didn't take too much time in the restroom.
No.
She had to get back to work.
Right, it was great.
No, she understands the process well, and that's something that I expect from all of the personnel that's out there, whether they're related to me or not.
Closing out today, I wanted to talk to you about something that isn't normally talked about, which is wills, trusts, estates. When people pass away, I think that a big collector like myself, if unfortunately I was to pass away, my fiance fortunately understands what value is there in my home, what value is there at our business, in the items that we have, because she goes with me, she works with me, her and I work side by side in order to make this happen. However, you'll run into many spouses, children, etc., that inherit a collection that comes from a really exceptional collection that comes through. Often those items are personally received by that person. They had it signed by their childhood hero. Then when they have them and they get them willed to them, they don't know what to do with them. Now, JSA has a service to help with this, but I don't think it's very widely known. Let's talk about that and what services you provide for people that inherit a collection that don't know where to start. And what does JSA do to help them, direct them in the right direction?
Okay, as a collector, I think you should safeguard your collection a couple of different things. Number one, create a spreadsheet about the item, what the item is, who is assigned by, the cost, what you paid for it. You could put down another column for a perceived value, but that's not necessarily as important for the start. Even the date of when you got it and who you got it from. I think a spreadsheet would be very, very valuable, especially after the collections I've seen where no one knew where anything came from. And if it has any type of authentication, there could be a column for that. So a simple spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, anybody can make that up on a computer. That's important. Second thing is, have your collection insured. And there are companies that actually do that are much more sensitive to collectibles than trying to get a rider on your homeowner's policy. I wouldn't recommend that. They're probably going to guesstimate things, and I think that there's certain companies out there that specialize in this, and maybe even take some videography of your collection, not necessarily an individual snapshot of every single piece you have, but take a camera or have it done professionally and go around that entire man cave, go into the closet and actually take that footage and secure it in a safe. And I'm sure you could do it on a little disc the way computers are these way.
Yeah.
I think those are very important things to safeguard so that you're not dumping on your family, years from now, a project which they had no idea they were getting into. Okay, so that's a start. Then we started something, I started it up many years ago when I started JSA. It's called And When I Die. And I named it that because I felt that there were so many people, and I was kind of looking into the future. I was saying, well, you know what? I think the higher end, I'm the lower end of the baby boomers. I think the higher end of the baby boomers, eventually they're going to die. They're going to become infirm. They're not going to, be able to take care of this collection. And some of these collections are quite valuable. I mean, some of them may be more than just more than $10,000. These things could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, what people have, accrued over a period of time, because it's done usually over a lifetime. So I feel that by signing up with us on that, it gives us an idea that they're entrusting us with the collection. We don't buy or sell, so we have no interest, such as a dealer may be interested in buying the collection for as little as possible, so he could sell it for as much as possible. We would be able to point the people in the right direction. We have access to all the auction houses. We know what sells well in certain auction houses. And this way, a person can virtually entrust us to helping out the widow or whoever was willed this collection. We're able to like guide them, point them in the right direction, or actually help them out with the collection, be there when the auctioneer comes up and looks at the collection, be able to maximize the value of their collection. Obviously, the things have to get authenticated ahead of time, but many of these regular customers already have many of their items authenticated by JSA. This has helped out a tremendous amount of people. I'm constantly visiting with widows, some of which I never even met and I might have known the collector for some 30 years, and all of a sudden I'm standing in their living room and she says, my husband had so many nice things to say about you. He knew you from when, blah, blah, blah. And, there is a comfort level that I see with these people that reach out to me.
Coming up on a little over 20 years now, or I should say, coming up on, what is it now, 13 years of JSA.
Mm-hmm.
You've built this into an incredible company.
Well, thank you.
What is the next step for Jimmy Spence? What are you going to do now moving forward? You're bringing your sons involved into the business. They're doing a great job. Jimmy Spence, the person, what is he going to be doing over the next few years? What are you looking to do?
Well, I've got one big project that needs to come to fruition, and that's encapsulation. I'm very interested in getting that. It's been a long time we've been working on this, but it's just months away. And I want to be able to compete with my competitors, be able to have a similar product to what they have, and be able to encase items such as autographs. And we're coming really, really close to getting that done. I'm excited about that. I want to see that take hold. I know it's going to be a success from the get-go. I'm not worried about that. And at some point, I want to back away a little bit. Would I ever remove myself, totally from this? I don't think so. I think it's in my blood. But I want to know the feeling of being able to go on a 2-week vacation. I want to be able to have the option to see my son play in his basketball or baseball game. I want to be able to not have to worry about jumping on a plane and going to somebody's city. So I think there's some personal things that I'd like to explore. I've been working very hard my whole life, since I was 10 and I had my first paper out. I think there's, things that I'd like to experience that I'm sure a lot of other people have enjoyed while I was out there working.
Well, building a company from scratch is very, very rewarding, but it is a challenge.
I have a wonderful staff, which includes many of my family members, and I think that, if you'd asked me that question, say 6-7 years ago when the company was still a fledgling company, I would say, well, I'd have to be part of it. It wouldn't exist without me. But quite honestly, I think that the way things are today and the set of knowledge we have and the exemplar folder and also the reputation we have in the industry, JSA will last a lot longer than I.
Yeah. I know it's been a very busy day for you today, and I appreciate so much the time that you took to spend with me on this interview. Thank you very much for your time.
It was wonderful. Thank you for coming.
It was awesome. Thank you.